we ready to go? All good. Great. Good morning, and everyone online can hear? Yep, great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Elizabeth McIsaac, and I'm the chair of the Housing Rights Advisory Committee. The clerk has confirmed that we have quorum, so I'd like to call meeting 8 of the Housing Rights Advisory Committee to order. Welcome to everyone. This meeting is being held with committee members and staff participating both by video conference and in person at City Hall in Committee Room 2. Members of the public may also attend in person or observe the meeting on YouTube. Because we are meeting in person and remotely, I ask for your patience should there be any delays or technical issues. If you are registered to speak at today's meeting, please listen for me to call your name, and I will call speakers in the order that they appear on the list. The list of speakers can be viewed online by visiting the Housing Rights Advisory Committee at toronto.ca/council and clicking the speakers box for today's meeting. I request that staff and invited participants, as well as all observers joining remotely, keep their video turned off unless they need to speak or answer questions. This will make it easier for me as chair to see the members as we debate and vote on agenda items. I also ask that members and staff keep their microphones muted unless you need to answer a question or speak. If members wish to speak on an item, please make sure your video is on and raise your hand or unmute your microphone and indicate your intention to speak. When voting on an item or a motion, I ask members to turn on your video and raise your hand to indicate your vote. I also remind members that if you have any motions or any agenda items, that they must be submitted in writing and can be emailed to staff at hrac@toronto.ca. So let's begin. And although we may be meeting in different locations today, the Housing Rights Advisory Committee would like to acknowledge that the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. It is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples, and we also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. So let's get into the content of the meeting. Let's begin with the minutes from our preceding meeting on September 16th. May I have a motion to confirm the minutes from September 16th, 2025? Thank you, Joy. So moved. May I please have a vote of those in favor? I'm looking online to see your hands up. Thank you. And everybody here, so carried. Thank you very much. Before we move on to the items of business on today's agenda, there are 2 new business items that I need to bring to your attention that have been submitted since the agenda. The first will be HS 8.10 on the potential impacts of Bill 60 on vulnerable tenants. Are there any questions about adding this item to our agenda today? Seeing none, can I please see all in favor of adding this item to the agenda with a show of hands? Is that everybody? Anyone opposed? Then that carries. The second item, so that will become 8.10 on the agenda. The next item is HS 8.11, and this is an item brought forward by Diana Chan McNally. And the item is regarding addressing changes to the Interdivisional Protocol on Encampments for alignment with the Toronto Housing Charter. We'd like to include that. Are there any questions or discussion before we add this item? Seeing none, I would say, can we have a vote for all in favor of adding this item to the agenda? Thank you, and that carries. There weren't any opposed, just for the note. I would also like to put forward that we will move item 8.11 regarding the IDP for encampments to follow on the agenda immediately after my chair's update. So that would make it then following 8.1, we'll move to 8.11. Are there any questions about moving the order of the agenda? Seeing none, can I have a vote, please? All in favor? Thank you, and carried. And we're good to go. Thank you. So, as the committee chair, I will provide an update to the committee. A written version of this has been submitted to the clerk and will be available online. I will go through quickly what the letter says. It's 2 pages, so I'm not going to read it verbatim, but I will give you the highlights. Since we last met, there are a number of issues that have impacted on the right to housing in Toronto, and they have been coming at us at all 3 orders of government, municipally, provincially, and federally. At the City of Toronto, I did receive an update. This committee had requested an update on the midpoint review of the Housing TO Plan and the city's progressive realization of the right to housing as outlined in the Toronto Charter. I received an update from the Executive Director of the Housing Secretariat outlining that while they had proceeded with a procurement process over the course of this year, the reality is that doing a review of the human rights outcomes and progressive realization of the right to housing has a very limited number of experts out there who can actually fulfill this mandate. So it took a while. They did actually begin to identify experts, but they did not get to the point of getting a consultant on board. They are moving forward now with an RFP to procure that consultant and complete the review over the course of 2026. They will and are pleased to re-engage with HRAC in early 2026 once that contract is awarded. So we can look forward to that. This was in response to our request for an update on this at this meeting. Earlier this month, as happens every year, the City of Toronto released its winter plan, which takes effect November 15th until April 15th. Last week, one of our own HRAC members, Diana Chan McNally, was interviewed on CBC. And she provided some overview of the impacts of some of the changes in the winter plan, and I think we will hear more about that when we get to the update from Working Group 1, which focuses on Unhoused. On November 14th, the City Council passed a motion to amend the Interdivisional Protocol on Encampments. I would note that while there was acknowledgement that the current rights-based approach has reduced encampments in Toronto since 2023, that there are legal obligations to provide meaningful shelter offers, and the Council did vote in favor of changes that effectively suspend human rights for encampment residents within the prescribed bubble zones. This is areas close to schools. Including placing a limit on the number of shelter offers a resident can receive. This step in limiting the number of offers of shelter runs counter to the established human rights principles set out in the original IDP and the Toronto Housing Charter and violates the principle of non-retrogression in the discipline of housing as a human right. Also on November 14th, the City of Toronto submitted a motion to intervene at the Court of Appeal in Hiigsma versus the City of Hamilton regarding the rights of people living in encampments. In this motion and factum, the City of Toronto argues against courts finding positive obligations on the part of cities to protect the right to life or security of the person or homeless persons under the Canadian Charter, Section 7. Toronto also argues that imposing a truly accessible standard on cities would create a positive duty to provide shelter space that meets the specific needs of an individual, and that this would be prohibitively onerous for a municipality. I believe it's important for the Housing Rights Advisory Committee to understand Toronto's interest in promoting interpretations of the Charter that are in opposition to its own commitments under the Toronto Housing Charter and its explicit recognition of the right to adequate housing under international law, including the right to accessible housing. It should be in Toronto's interest to have these obligations on all orders of government clarified rather than undermined, so that a common standard and approach can be adopted and that necessary resources can be identified from appropriate orders of government. To that end, I am recommending that we invite the City's solicitor to the next Housing Rights Advisory Committee to engage with us around this approach so that we can understand this better. At the provincial level, I think many of us are aware that the Ontario government has recently introduced Bill 60, Fighting Delays, Building Faster Act, which includes 13 tenancy-related provisions that undermine tenant protections and rights. If passed, Bill 60 will eliminate tenant compensation requirements for own use evictions, reduce the eviction notice period for rental arrears, and significantly diminish renters' ability to advocate for themselves when faced with an eviction. Importantly, an increase in evictions will result in more homelessness. I want to acknowledge the advocacy and coordination across the housing rights sector and of Mayor Chow and City Council to oppose these changes and advocate for stronger tenant protections. Last week, Council passed the following motion that City Council request the Executive Director, Housing Secretariat present to the Housing Rights Advisory Committee on the potential impact of the changes in Bill 60, as well as changes to the security of tenure and rent control. To that end, we do have someone from the Housing Secretariat who will present to us on that, and that was the item I just added to the agenda before this report. Finally, the federal government. The federal budget was tabled on November the 4th. It confirms the federal government's plan to cut funding for the Interim Housing Assistance Program, known as IHAP, which provides funding to provinces and municipalities to support asylum claimants with housing needs. This funding cut leaves the city short by approximately $100 million next year. The rationale for this cut, as noted in the budget, is to support the government's savings targets. In alignment with the motion through our last Housing Rights Advisory Committee meeting, I would like to confirm that I did write and I submitted a letter on September 24th, 2025 to the Honourable Alina Diab, the Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship, to express our deep concern regarding the funding cuts to IHAP. To date, I have not received a response from the Minister. The federal budget also has earmarked approximately $7 billion of new funding over the next 5 years with the goal of expanding transitional and supportive housing in partnership with all orders of government and Indigenous communities. While this represents an important investment in transitional, supportive, community and cooperative housing supply, it remains inadequate for the challenges we face in advancing the right to adequate housing and certainly the issues that we are addressing in this committee. That is my report for this meeting. Do you have any questions? Diana.
Council Priest. If I can ask, I am kind of curious to know, when we're talking about the housing TO plan and the consultation that was planned with ATRAC, if we have any sense of why we didn't engage in a non-competitive contract with the one consultant that was identified with the expertise. I'm cognizant that this is going to create some delays for our input, and I'd just like to better understand why that wasn't the process. If anyone can answer that. Maybe they can't.
Is there anyone from the Housing Secretariat present that can respond to that?
Through the chair, I'm not able to respond to that right now, but happy to get that information for you.
Thank you. Are there other questions arising from the report? Gordon.
So in your letter, you talk about inviting the city solicitor to come and explain, and this is actually a new thing for me. I understand the city solicitor coming and giving reasons at council or at a council committee, but I'm unfamiliar with the terrain of the city solicitor talking about the legal stance they're taking when council's the client to an advisory committee. It's odd. Have you discussed this with us?
I haven't, I have not, and so I welcome the question because from my thinking on this, the city has made a commitment to the right to housing as per the International Covenant. And so it's about a coherent approach, that there's integrity across what we're doing. And so it's not calling into account, it's more help us understand the rationale. So it's an educational exchange that I'm looking for, not...
I mean, I could understand giving advice, like if this committee gave advice to council through the executive committee, that I could understand. It's that the city solicitor has to respect the fact that the city's the client.
I see.
Yeah, and it might be awkward for the city solicitor. I feel like I put my foot in a leg hold trap here. I'm not sure that would work, is all. We might have to have a conversation with them to figure it out.
So maybe the next step is to have a conversation to understand how we can, because I think it's important for this committee to understand.
It just might be that the city solicitor isn't in a legal position, given who her client is, to come and discuss it with us. I just don't know that. Let's investigate it.
Let's investigate it. So we will reach out and we will find out.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it, because I appreciate there's a particular relationship there. But I do think it's important that this committee, in order to provide good advice to the city, understand the city's approach to recognizing and approach to interpreting Section 7 of the Charter, which is still sort of an area of debate among legal scholars.
Oh, yes.
And we're not legal scholars, but it does underpin the approach and the direction that the city takes. And given that we are engaging in that on so many fronts, I think it's helpful for us to have a better understanding. So that's the intention of the invitation. And so it won't affect what's going
Yeah.
forward.
I just don't want members to be disappointed if the city solicitor says, you're not my client, I can't give you legal advice, right?
And we're not looking for legal
Yeah.
advice, more an educational exchange
Yeah.
on how are we understanding
Yep.
the right to housing. Great. Thank you. Harmy.
Yeah, quick question. In terms of the letter you submitted to Minister of Immigration, do we have any idea as to when should we hear back? Is there any protocol or any sort of policy that will tell us in regards to a formal response? I wonder because in my day job, we submit letters and we often go even unrecognized as to we send letters. And I'm trying to get to the point of finding out if they could indeed just ignore my letters to the extent. So I wonder if that's something we could look at, because at least to acknowledge that they received it. There is some level of accountability there. That's all.
In my experience, it can take months between submitting a letter to a minister, and I did copy the Minister of Housing, the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Justice, because I feel that all of those departments have a role to play in this. There is no obligation for them to respond. I typically will see a response within 2 or 3 months. It's hard to tell. I can certainly inquire, but I don't believe there's an obligation. And certainly, I didn't expect a response before the budget. We may get one now that the budget has passed, but that's my best answer to that. Are there other questions? Diana.
So sorry. I will speak a little bit about the winter plan because it'll be part of my working group update. But something that I've heard from fellow advocates, people who are doing this work, is that we do have, for example, triggers on warming centers that begin at -5 degrees Celsius, and there's a certain arbitrariness, I think, to this temperature threshold. We've seen, we have evidence, medical evidence, that shows that when it's 10 degrees Celsius, people can still suffer from hypothermia. And so there's an ongoing questioning about why the temperature threshold is as low as it is. Go outside right now, you can absolutely get sick if you're out in that cold for a long time. So I'm wondering if there's staff present to maybe kind of speak to why the -5 degrees Celsius threshold is in place and why it's not higher. Or lower, rather.
I think it's an excellent question. Joseph. We have Joseph Stalteri here.
Through the chair, thanks for the question. So we take our direction from public health in terms of what is considered the appropriate threshold. We have recently changed that threshold where previously we were at -15 and have recently changed it with council direction to lower that to -5.
Fair, and I'm wondering then if this is a conversation we need to have with Toronto Public Health. If they have the authority and you're working in tandem with them to determine what the threshold is, then I feel like logically maybe there's place for presentation or something, perhaps from, it's not a question you, from Toronto Public Health to better understand and maybe look at what other options might be available. I don't know.
I believe we have the ability to invite Public Health to join us, perhaps at the next meeting. I think the question of a threshold, knowing that people can be very adversely affected by temperatures above -5 and other impacts of climate and outdoor living. So on that basis, if we will ask and pursue having a presentation by Public Health. And is that to come to the HRAC as a whole or to the working group? So we'll look to invite Public Health to Working Group 1, which is looking at Unhoused. Great, thank you. Are there other questions? I'm looking at the screen. Hi, Annie, yes.
Yeah, hi. I was just wondering regarding the midpoint review of the Housing TO Action Plan and the right to housing, given the delay in securing a consultant, I'm just wondering if there's any sense of when, like timing for receiving the report at this point.
So the message that I received from the Executive Director of the Housing Secretariat was that it would be completed in 2026, that they are currently doing the RFP and scope of work right now. So I think the intention is that also this allows them to have the fullness of the first 5 years behind and able to do that. So my expectation is that it would be 2026. I am looking for confirmation. Yes. Okay. So. All right.
Thanks.
If there are not any further questions, then I move to receive the item. If I could, so if I'm moving to receive the item, may I please see a show of hands for all in favor? Terrific. That's carried. Thank you very much. So the next item, as per the change in order, will be item 8.11, which is Diana's item regarding the IDP changes. So Diana, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And you framed this a little bit in your introductory remarks in regard to the changes to the interdivisional protocol encampments that were passed at our last council, which was last Thursday, so very recent changes. And so, you know, in regard to this, we do see retrogression happening where we're actually creating higher barriers for people to be able to live in an encampment and have their rights observed. So I've written a letter, which I'll read to the committee. So. Assessing changes to the Interdivisional Protocol on Encampments, IDP, for alignment with the Toronto Housing Charter. So, to members of the Housing Rights Advisory Committee. As a member of the Housing Rights Advisory Committee, or HRAC, and chair of its Supporting Unhoused Rights Holders Working Group, it is imperative to my work and the broader work of the committee that the rights of people who are unsheltered and living in encampments are both respected and upheld in the City of Toronto's policies and practices. It is therefore of the utmost concern that recent changes to the Interdivisional Protocol on Encampments, or IDP, passed by City Council on November 14, 2025, represents retrogression, a violation of unhoused people's human rights. These changes effectively suspend human rights for encampment residents within prescribed bubble zones, including by placing a limit on the number of shelter offers a resident can receive. This is a deliberate incursion on the established human rights principles set out in the original IDP, i.e. retrogression. So the recommendation is that the Housing Rights Advisory Committee recommends that City Council request that the General Manager, Shelter and Support Services ensure that any changes to the Interdivisional Protocol Encampments, or IDP, be assessed for compliance with the City's obligation to realize the right to adequate housing, as affirmed in the Toronto Housing Charter, national and international law, and be undertaken in consultation with the Housing Rights Advisory Committee. So this is a big request. It's a big change. We have no accountability mechanism for when we change the protocol. That does not exist. We exist. We certainly can have purview to look at whether or not these changes align with human rights principles. And I think what we saw on November 14th is that, again, this is an act of retrogression. We are actively stripping away at people's human rights. So, you know, I find this motion that was passed egregious. I would like to see that there is a mechanism put in place, and we are requesting that City Council give some authority to our committee to be able to consult with them whenever these changes take place. So at this moment, Council has the ultimate authority. We are asking that we also be included in the decision-making process. So hoping this can go to Council, and we'll see what happens.
Thank you, Diana. I'll first open it up to the committee if there are any questions to Diana's suggestion and forthcoming motion. Gord, do you have a comment?
So, first, I didn't vote for this. I voted against it. Just to have that on the record. There's an important nuance here that I think members and I think everyone in Toronto needs to be aware of. Toronto City Council cannot direct enforcement activity. So we're not allowed to tell a police officer, go arrest that guy. We're not allowed to tell a municipal licensing and standards officer, go investigate that property. And we're not allowed to tell the enforcement people involved in encampments, go close that encampment. And the city solicitor was very clear in questions when this issue was being debated that council can't impose a direction that says go enforce that encampment. So despite that advice, council did vote in favor of it. Legally, I would have to say that council's decision is a suggestion to enforcement staff. And frankly, I don't even think the vote to do that was particularly legal, but I made that case and a majority of members did. So as a corollary, I think the advice we give, we have to be careful we're not telling staff which encampments to do enforcement activity, what the rules are for enforcement activity, but stressing instead, as Diana's letter does, that whatever city staff do, they shouldn't amend their procedures in a way that reduces rights. And in that context, I think it would be very valuable to have the conversation. But yeah, it's an interesting moment. We also got advice very clearly from the city solicitor that the current legal test is adequate shelter or housing. And city council can't just make up law either, so.
Go ahead. Do you want to answer that? I just wanted to clarify. Council cannot direct staff to, but the protocol itself has lowered the threshold. Is that not true? It has changed the threshold. The staff will act on it as they will, but the actual protocol are the rules of the game.
So I'm not the city solicitor, but my sense is that staff will look at council's decision and take it as a suggestion rather than an amendment to how they operate. That's what they have to do. They can't go to an encampment based on council's recent decision and say city council said we have to clear you. They can't do that.
No, that's not a straight line, but there has been a change to the protocol, which are their guardrails for directing how they.
And that's a question that I think we're going to have to wait and see what actually happens. Because I for one, and I think I'm on solid ground here, think that council went outside of its authority when it made that decision.
From a legal perspective, I would absolutely agree. We heard from the city solicitor. We have experts in this committee, in this room, who would also agree that whatever standard is being set through these changes to the IDP do not meet the legal requirements that are set out in the Waterloo ruling, for example. At the same time, we would not be unique as a municipality in making these kinds of changes.
Yep.
And what we've seen in Barrie, for example, is that even when those changes do not follow the legal standard, they are still acted upon. You're asking for trust.
No, I'm not saying, I'm just, what I'm trying to say to the committee is, council made a mistake, in my view, and in the view of many people, of trying to direct enforcement activity. And I think as long as our response stays on the ground of don't retrogress and don't direct enforcement activity, we're fine. But I don't want us to wander into our own version of what the enforcement activity should be.
Fair, it's not your
Yeah,
purview.
that's, yeah.
Agreed.
Okay.
Are there other questions from the committee or comments? Seeing none, Diana, you have a motion you want to bring forward?
Yes.
It's not? Oh, it's just a recommendation. Okay, so it's all contained. Sorry, things changed since I wasn't. Things have been updated. Great. So with that, thank you. I think this is a really important direction that we need to follow closely and see, to Gore's point, see how it does play out. And I think stay vigilant about how we are approaching this overall as a city. That brings us then to item 8.2. So apologies. We're going to vote to adopt the item, to receive the item. Can I please have a show of hands for all in favor to receive the item, to adopt the item? Thank you. Carried. 8.2, advancing the right to adequate housing in the 2026 City of Toronto budget. This came about as a result of the meeting of the working group chairs. And we met after the working groups each had their individual meetings and agreed that HRAC as a whole should submit to the budget process. And so with their help and with the issues that have arisen in their particular working groups, we put together an overall submission which was posted 2 weeks ago. So people have had an opportunity. I'm not going to read the submission. It's 4 pages long. But it does emerge from the discussions that the different working groups have been having. You should have had an opportunity to review it. Are there any questions to it, to the budget? The budget submission, rather. At a very high level, we're covering the issues that each of the working groups is looking at, ensuring adequate resources and using the principles attached to a human rights-based approach, recognizing that we are pursuing a progressive realization of the right to housing and using the maximum available resources, which is why this is an important moment in looking at the budget to ensure that we really are using the maximum available resources for those in greatest need. And so that is reflected in the submission that we have drafted and put forward. Looking for any questions or comments from the committee? Seeing none, there is a motion to move on this item. And it's coming up on the screen. The chair of the Housing Rights Advisory Committee write a letter. Nope, that's the wrong one. That's okay. That's okay. Is it coming? Do we need to draft it? Nope, that's the benefit cut. That's not for 8.2. This is to submit this letter to forward to accept this letter to forward to the mayor regarding the Will just be 1 minute. So we're going to come back to it. Sorry, Joy, did you have a question? B?
No, I'm just wondering because my phone is old phone. I couldn't access to any reading material ahead before this meeting.
Okay.
I apologize. So I don't know what's in the letter. I'm thinking because I was told from my shelter worker that this COP, Canada Ontario Benefit, CO, housing benefit, whatever the amount they put out, that what Manuel told us is shall be cut, but that amount is not for new applicant. That amount is only for people who already on this system. So they are continue to supply them, the funding for them to continue on the subsidy. So my understanding that for this 2025 to 2026, the COP amount that provincial put out is not for new applicant, because this was what I was told by my worker, that no funding for people who are applying for COP this year. I mean, those money that have been put out for this coming year is only for people who are in the system to continue the subsidy. So my question is, would city have more funding, put on more funding into this COP? Like last year, because COP was delayed for 6 months, so city put some money, like because of influx of, also because I think 2023 influx of refugee and resettlement, so they put some money, right, on top of that, the amount province put out. So I wonder, would city do the same, like put out, because no new funding for new applicant, so would they put out some funding into this COP for people who are applying for subsidy, new applicant, what I mean? Otherwise, people in the shelter will be stuck. There's no way to get out because no funding.
Thank you, B. I think we have someone from the city that wants to answer.
Thanks for the question. So related to the Canada Ontario Housing Benefit, it's funded by the provincial and federal governments, like you acknowledge. And every year, the city gets a letter saying, this is how many benefits you are able to provide. So we have received that letter for the current year, and we have now fully allocated all of the Canada Ontario housing benefits, so you're correct. The city did this year invest, I believe, I'm not going to recall the exact number, but did make an investment to address the fact that we were waiting for the provincial and federal funding announcement. At this point, I'm not aware of council hasn't indicated that there's going to be further investment. So you're right, our COB has been fully allocated. City Council has been advocating and has reached out to both the federal and provincial governments to indicate the importance of this benefit. And as you say, it is a critical benefit that enables people to leave shelter into permanent, affordable homes.
Thank you. B, we made an error at this end of the table. There's actually a motion that speaks to our advocacy around the Canada Ontario Housing Benefit, and that was the motion that went up on the screen. So we're going to return to that because you're absolutely correct. This is a critical lifeline to people getting out of shelters and being able to establish themselves, and it has been cut dramatically. So the motion, we can put that up now. First of all, B, are you satisfied with the response that you heard?
Yeah, I understand that during that period when the cycle closed on March 2025, and then another 6 month delay, right? It's supposed to start on April 2025, but probably didn't put out any money until, I haven't heard anything about October. But during that period from April 2025 to September, that's a cycle that six-month period that province didn't put out like last year. I knew that city did have some funding for the COP, but it's very limited. It's only like one applicant per shelter, you know? Yeah, so it's like, it's not doing much. But thank you, city, for doing that, you know, at least for that relay period, you know, to put some out for, so people can move on. But yeah, so I don't know, you know, in that case, you know, did the province tell the city that this amount that they put out for this coming year is only for the existing client on subsidy, or for new applicant?
For the current year, we have no more COB available to allocate. So there
Yeah, I
are no new
understand that.
applicants now. And then next year, we're anticipating that we'll have funding for about 610 new applicants.
So this is not the one, the amount, not the one that they put out before, right? It's a new one? I was told last month from my worker that, because I thought the October, the funding for the coming cycle will be out in October, even though after 6 month delay, and I will able to apply. But then my workers said, no, the amount they put out is only for people who are on the system, but not for new applicant. She told me they just had a meeting that day, and the supervisor told them 0 for this coming year for new applicant.
Through the chair, there are currently no COB allocations available.
Okay.
So your worker is correct.
Okay,
Period.
thank you.
So thank you, B. Thank you, Sarah. I think that this highlights the deep inadequacy of access to the kinds of supports and benefits that would enable people to find and have access to affordable and deeply affordable housing. To this end, we do have a motion that we're going to put up on the screen, which comes out of the budget analysis. And B, I have a copy I will give to you so that you can take a look at the budget. I will read the motion to you, that the Housing Rights Advisory Committee recommends that the chair of the Housing Rights Advisory Committee write a letter to the Provincial Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing in alignment with item EX 26.13 to express the committee's deep concern regarding the funding cuts to the Canada-Ontario Housing Benefit for 2026, which will significantly reduce the amount of people who are able to leave the shelter system and move into safe, affordable, and adequate housing, and jeopardize the city's ability to protect, respect, and fulfill the human right to adequate housing. So I think we will support the advocacy that the city is already doing and trying to move the province. Are there any questions on that motion? Can I therefore have a vote in favor of moving this, of adopting the motion? Thank you. And the item as amended. Second vote? Yep. And that then makes the item as amended. A show of hands. Thank you. Excellent. And we got there. Terrific. So the next item is 8.3, Centralized Access System for Affordable Rental and Rent Geared to Income Homes. We are joined today by Yulisa Diager. You can correct me? You should correct me?
That's correct.
Thank you. And Sarah Blackstock from the Housing Secretariat, who will present on Centralized Access System for Affordable Rental and Rent Geared to Income Homes. So over to both of you.
Okay, Yulissa's going to work some IT magic, we hope, and pull up the slide deck. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sarah Blackstock. I work in the Housing Secretariat. And while Yulissa, there we go, is pulling up the deck. So you asked us to come back and talk to you about the centralized access system that we currently have in place for deeply affordable RGI homes, and that we're planning to integrate affordable rental homes into. So we're going to do a couple of things this morning. We're going to provide an overview of the system, And then we'd like to talk with you about the human rights principles that we have tried to embed in the design and delivery of this system, and in our efforts to think about how we're going to continually improve this system, as we hear from this group and others, is really important in our shared work. And then we're going to talk a little bit about our plans to add affordable rental homes into this system. Next slide, please. So right now, we have a centralized access point for Torontonians to apply for deeply affordable rent geared to income homes. And like I said, we're working to make this the point where people can also apply for affordable rental homes. We refer to this system as My Access to Housing TO. So what is it? So this launched in 2021, and it's an online portal that provides Torontonians with a secure, transparent, streamlined process to submit and manage their applications for RGI housing. On the platform, there are photos of units, there are maps, and there's details about the buildings so that applicants have information and can make choices about where they live. Why did we do this? Well, we were trying to create a system that made it easier for residents to apply for RGI housing, and because this is a really important system that Torontonians rely on, and the city needed to improve our oversight of this system so that we could be engaged, providing council and Torontonians with good information about the demand and about what we're able to do with our housing stock. And now we've been working to add affordable rental homes into this portal so that residents have one spot where they apply for deeply affordable RGI homes, and that same spot is where Torontonians can also apply for affordable rental homes. So in 2026, we are intending to integrate affordable homes into this portal. And we're going to do that using the same infrastructure that we have for the RGI system. There are several benefits, we think, to integrating the affordable rental housing into this platform. Like I said, there'll be one spot where people can apply for both RGI and affordable homes. It's fair, it's transparent, and we hope it makes it easier for Torontonians to make informed decisions about the housing options when they become available. And like I said, it's going to give the city better information and better oversight so we have a better system to address what we know is a very significant need in Toronto. I want to be clear, though, about what this is and what this is not. So there's one access point for two very distinct programs. And I think this is a really important point. RGI, rent geared to income housing, is deeply affordable housing. RGI is intended for people with low incomes, and tenants pay about 30% of their gross income towards their rent. The city provides ongoing funding to those housing operators so that the housing is deeply affordable for tenants. And most of this housing is Toronto community housing, Toronto seniors housing, not-for-profit housing, and co-ops. And we all know we need a lot more deeply affordable rent geared to income housing. And so one of the things that City Council has done is said that when a new affordable housing project is built that has city incentives, they would like to see 20% of those affordable units made into deeply affordable rent geared to income housing. Then we have what we refer to as affordable rental homes. But let's be clear here. Joy's smiling at me. These homes are not affordable for everyone. They are affordable for middle-income Torontonians. Rents are at or below average market rent. And to give you an idea of what that looks like, in a project that we recently, where there was recently some affordable homes available, a one-bedroom unit was $1,715 a month. These are not RGI homes. The city does not provide ongoing funding to these housing providers, to these landlords. The city provides incentives during the development stage, and that's what gives us the leverage to make these affordable. So part of what we are going to do now is talk a little bit about some of the human rights principles that we have tried to embed and are really interested in getting your feedback on. And we hope that we're also highlighting for you some of the challenges that we're facing in designing the system and thinking about how do we make sure that it is accessible and that it's clear to Torontonians about what it is and what it isn't. And I'm now going to turn it over to Yulissa.
Thank you, Sarah. So we're going to take a look at the human rights-based approach that was embedded in the implementation of My Access to Housing TO, with a particular focus on participation, accountability, and administrative oversight, and commitments to non-discrimination. Regarding participation, throughout the initial piloting, the implementation, the design of the system, there was extensive stakeholder engagement to inform what these requirements would look like and how the system would function. Once it was initially implemented, we had a continuous improvement strategy to continually take the user feedback and feedback from our partners and other stakeholders to make sure that the system is functioning as intended and to seek out improvement opportunities. We do have embedded feedback channels, particularly with our Application Support Center. Access to Housing's Resource Center receives real-time information from applicants themselves, and we have an extensive network of community agency partners and shelter partners, including housing hubs, that provide us feedback. Regarding accountability, this new system allows us to produce more robust reporting, and it will allow us to have a better understanding of trend analysis and allow us to pull multiple fields of data to consider. There is also timely communication within the system as we are able to provide applicants decisions on eligibility requests as well as unit vacancies. There is enhanced oversight and ability to monitor more closely and have more data analysis to ensure administrative fairness. And again, more continuous improvements are being made to make sure that program communication, operational policy, and procedures are enhanced over time. And importantly, there is a right to an internal review process, which applicants are able to request either through the system, through the phone, or in person. There is a commitment to non-discrimination, and in particular, we have piloted and now carried forward a case management approach where applicants who need additional supports are able to receive more tailored supports, more one-on-one supports from Access to Housing to support their participation within choice-based housing cycles. We have enhanced in-person supports across the city through our Housing Hub network. We offer both individual appointments as well as group workshops across the city. We have also piloted a proxy bidding program with emergency shelters to help homeless applicants fully participate in maintaining their application and participating in choice-based housing cycles. And as part of the RGI program, there are priority groups that are specific to marginalized communities as outlined in the Housing Services Act and through council local priorities. Some of the human rights-based intended outcomes would be affordability, so increased access to affordable and deeply affordable housing opportunities through one application and being able to consider the two programs. Habitability and availability of services, so increased access to housing that is safe, secure, and in a state of good repair. Location, clients are able to make informed choices on the location of their housing using the map feature and being able to gauge how close they are to essential services, amenities, transportation, and their community. There is the security of tenure, so guaranteed tenancies protections through standard leases. Accessibility, the ability to request an accommodation for applicants needing tailored supports, and the ability to view building and unit information, including accessibility features, and the ability to access housing opportunities anywhere and on multiple devices. And finally, cultural adequacy. Applicants are able to access housing opportunities in their preferred languages, as My Access to Housing TO can be translated into over 50 languages. There is some follow-up from some of our previous discussions that we had at workshop sessions, which we greatly appreciated the feedback we received. So one item would be the automated income verification that we are moving towards with the launch of the Affordable Housing Program. And that would be using the tool of optical character recognition. And again, the optical character recognition tool would read notices of assessments and would be able to render a pre-eligibility status. And applicants who are not required to submit a notice of assessment up front or who perhaps are struggling with this requirement would have a mechanism to bypass this and connect directly with a caseworker. Additionally, there are landlord screenings for affordable rental homes, so tenants will be required to have income that covers the rent for a particular unit. And as Sarah mentioned before, the rents in affordable rental housing are not RGI rates, they are just at or below market rent. In terms of priority access for affordable rental homes, the Housing Secretariat is developing a framework to support decision-making that is fair and consistent. And within our system, we do have the ability to pull disaggregated data as we currently collect demographic data for age, gender, race, Indigenous identity, full-time wheelchair users, and status in Canada. I'll pass it to Sarah.
We had some questions that we're grappling with that we'd appreciate the insight of the committee members for, which we've posted here. And of course, we're happy for your comments and questions. Maybe I'll just note that one of the things that we're really thinking about is the fact that RGI and affordable are really different, and we want to make sure that applicants have a clear understanding of that difference and they apply for housing that's right for them. And then similarly, we're concerned because we know the need for affordable NRGI housing is massive. We are going to be launching this system. We want to make sure that Torontonians know about it. But we also need to acknowledge that while we're going to have this improved system, we still have a long way to go before the supply comes anywhere close to being able to meet demand. So we're curious about your insights and advice about how we can best communicate with Torontonians to promote the system, but not to mislead Torontonians. And we'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a great overview. There's some detail, and there might be questions of clarification from some of the committee, but I'll pause there and turn to everyone. If I can't see anybody online just now, so I'll look at the people in the room for the moment. Are there any questions? B.
I had a question. I totally understand the difference between RGI and affordable rental home. My question is, it seems like the affordable rental home is only for middle class. how about if people who are low income? Is there any subsidy? Like, I mean, like, RJ is based on your income, right? That's how you get your income. Then people get like 30%, is like maybe 100 something, 300 something maximum. I heard from my peer, some of them the maximum they pay is 300 something per month. Some even pay $50. Right. I'm thankful for that RGI program. My question is for people who are low income and who want to apply for this affordable rental home, and is there any subsidy? I know, I mean, the rent is a little bit below the market rent rate, but is there any subsidy that people can apply in order to get that subsidy and apply for the affordable rental home?
Through the chair, thanks for the question. The short answer is no. So the solution, however, and the direction that City Council has established is that the best way to support, so when City Council is doing everything it can to try and encourage the development and support the development of these affordable homes. But council is saying, look, we know that those affordable homes aren't really affordable for low-income people. Therefore, we want 20% of those affordable homes to be set aside for RGI so that people who are on this centralized wait list for RGI can get access to them and use that subsidy.
Okay, so now my understanding is that affordable housing rental home, whatever they put out, like usually it's 100 units. I haven't seen more than 100 units so far. Usually 100 units. So are you saying that 100 unit, 20% of that 100 unit will be set aside for RGI?
Through the chair, that's what council's told us to do. The way that people would apply for those RGI homes, for those really affordable ones, is through the centralized wait list.
Okay. So if people are not on the centralized wait list, they will not able to get that?
That is correct.
Okay. So that means low-income people still have hope to get that affordable rental home then, right? Because 20% are set for people to apply on 30% of their income, right?
Through the chair, the idea is that it's the same access point, but you would still be applying. If you're on the centralized wait list, you would still be applying through that system. So there will be more affordable homes. We're going to set aside some of those for people who need RGI.
Okay. That's a good news. Before it's not. Before it's only affordable rental home, it's only like, that's it, right, 100 unit, but people who are low income, you cannot, even though, I mean, it's a bit below market rent, but people still cannot afford without subsidy, right? But with that 20% set aside for RGI, and then in that case, then people can apply based on that, and then they get 30% on their income to pay the rent. Yeah, that's a good news. Thank you.
Diana?
I mean, in regard to your first question, I would fall in the category of people who can access affordable housing. Anyone who would be applying for RGI because they simply cannot access affordable housing, how are we differentiating and creating barriers so that we don't have people who could not reasonably afford $1,715 a month? How do we stop them from applying and accessing housing that we know they can't actually afford because the definitions aren't clear? So I'm wondering, within the system and when you're designing it, I don't know, what the portal looks like. There's a questionnaire or whatever. There should be some checker mechanism built into that so that there's clarity so that people don't get stuck in a situation where they could reasonably only afford RGI, now in the position of being offered affordable housing that they can't actually afford. That has to be built in to the system to start so that we don't have suddenly a bunch of people who are like, I have new housing, and then they're evicted because they can't actually afford it. So it has to be built in from the get-go, I think, just to make sure that we don't have that situation.
Through the chair, absolutely, that is the intention, and we'll likely be coming to this and other groups to make sure that we've got that design right.
Okay.
And I think to your earlier question, there is a maximum income that that is established for people to access affordable homes, and the maximum income that someone can have is that your annual income is no more than 4 times the total yearly cost of the rent.
Okay. Okay, and as for the, well, I mean, I have like my own questions about this. You're talking about how do we kind of communicate to the public that, you know, we have this great new portal, this is great, it's all kind of like a one-stop shop, but the demand will far outstrip the need. In my experience, people already know that, to be perfectly honest. Of course, I've been working in homelessness services for the past 11 years. The vast majority of people that I'm supporting to be on the RGI waitlist, for example, are very well aware that they could die long before that housing actually becomes available. So, you know, at the level of community agencies, we already know this, but I think it would be important to make sure that information is made available to community-based resources that people are already accessing. I know, you know, as a case manager, they're going to ask me about it. That's what people will do. So make sure you're going to community centers, libraries, drop-ins, and other like services so that this is known to the staff who will obviously be fielding the kinds of questions and having communication with people who are in the space who I feel reasonably would be trying to access this housing. So your communication strategy should be broad and very much rooted in the community.
To the people online, Lindsay and then Annie.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yep.
My fire alarm is going off. Sorry. It's fun.
So do you want me to come back to you, Lindsay, when the fire alarm has stopped?
It usually takes like 15 minutes of them doing this.
We can hear you, so and it's not interrupting the sound on our end. So if you want to go ahead with your question or comment, please do.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so I was noticing what jumped out at me is the 20% of new projects are turned into rent geared to income, and then in brackets it said funding available. What determining factors would include the funding not be available? So what are the chances of there not being 20% of rent geared to income? Like, why would that not be?
For the chair, thank you for the question. So just to be clear, what she's emphasizing, the question was, how are we going to ensure that the 20% of affordable homes is set aside for RGI? So the short answer is that goes through the budget process. So that is council's decision. That's the short answer. The longer answer is that council and staff through different channels are consistently working with primarily the provincial government to secure the funding that we need to make that make those homes deeply affordable. So it's a 2-part answer.
Thank you. Annie.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. And I guess just to put a bit of a finer point on one of the items that Diana kind of touched on, I managed an eviction prevention program for many years, and I've spoken to many people who are in crisis saying, I'm going to lose my home, I'm being evicted for arrears, so where do I go now? And so they can't access TCHC, the wait list is too long. They can't get on the RGI list or it's too long. They can't afford these affordable homes. And so like many times I've been talking to people that are just saying, I can't afford anything. I guess I have to leave Toronto. So I guess I'm just raising this more as a comment in terms of, are we thinking creatively because we know the situation people are in? Are there other ways that we can support them in those situations? I had started thinking, I mean, it's not ideal, but I was starting to think about, bridging programs to get people to areas where they can afford homes, or perhaps I know that housing help centers put together a somewhat informal list of market affordable homes. So I don't know if the city has sort of put some thought into complementary, supports that are available to people, so that they're just not in the situation of I can't access any of these programs. So just more of a comment, but if you do have any sort of information on that, I'd appreciate it. Thanks.
Through the chair, your comment is well taken and fully appreciated. The city does, as you note, we have 11 housing hubs across the city that do work with people who are facing displacement or at risk of eviction. We have an eviction prevention program, and we have programs like the Rent Bank that can help people. And we know that those programs are in very high demand. We're not able to meet all of the need, and like you say, the need for protecting existing affordable rental housing is also important. So council has made some decisions to, through our multi-unit residential program, for instance, to try and protect some of these currently affordable rental homes from being redeveloped into really expensive homes. So there are efforts on multiple fronts, and it's work that needs to continue and be strengthened.
Diana.
Sorry, and just thinking and building upon what I was saying about liaising with community-based resources, I'm also thinking, part of what happened when we transitioned to Mathio, or rather into like Rent Cafe and that sort of thing, is that we used to do housing work as drop-in workers, as community workers, and that was taken away, essentially, our access to the system, and then placed within the housing hubs. But at the same time, we get people who come to us on a daily basis and ask us for support with housing, which we can no longer offer and often don't know enough about because we no longer have that access. Now, I'm not suggesting the access necessarily should change, but I am suggesting that we do train shelter workers, drop-in workers, housing workers, not the official ones, in what the system actually looks like and how it works, so that we can communicate to our communities more broadly. And so I feel like the natural place for that would be TSN, Toronto Shelter Network, TDIN, Toronto Drop-In Network, and then EYET does a number of trainings as well on how to access housing. And so I think having a community-based education program so that workers are aware of how this works would go a long way to helping people to understand what the program is, how to access it, and also what some of the constraints will be, including, we have more demand than we actually have available housing. So that's just my suggestion.
Annie.
Yeah, no, thanks very much. And I'm very familiar with all the different programs. I was on the Rent Bank steering committee at one point, and on, quite aware of the interconnections between the different programs. And so, I understand the city does a lot of, important work in this area. I just think there might be an opportunity to think about whether there are any complementary programs that might be put in place, because I do know that these programs are not meeting all the needs that we hear about, and some of them are quite repetitive. And so just wanted to kind of comment on that. And I totally agree with Diana that there's room for education about how the system operates, and my organization's been doing a bit of work with the city on that. So I know that some of that is underway, but Rent Bank covers it for example, it's a sort of patchwork. You get the Rent Bank if you can bridges people into maintaining their housing, but if the housing is long-term unsustainable for them, these are the folks that then they can't afford their existing home and they can't afford anything in Toronto, and that's a group that I think is not necessarily receiving the supports they need. So I just wanted to highlight that gap for us, and just in terms of thinking about solutions for people that we're hearing directly from in terms of what they need. Thanks.
Thanks, Annie. Joy, did I see your hand up? No? B.
Sorry, so many questions. From my understanding, before this lottery system, so is these new changes also apply now to those people who apply for the affordable housing? How about the RGI? Are they also have to within this lottery system or no more?
If I understand, through the chair, if I understand your question, you're asking, will people who are applying for RGI need to go through a lottery?
Yeah, before it was, right? How about the new thing now?
Yeah, so people who are applying for deeply affordable RGI will do so through the centralized wait list. In the new system, we are going to be putting all of the affordable rentals into this single portal, so there'll be one access point. And then we're thinking through how those will be allocated, or what the exact mechanisms will be to gain access to those.
So they do not have to go to the lottery system in that case, right?
Through the chair, the RGI units are allocated according to the legislation.
Okay.
So it has a particular sequence that we work through, and that will not change.
Okay. So how about people who are applying for, not RGI, the general affordable rental home? Are they have to go through the lottery system like before?
Through the chair, we are working through those allocation methods, and we'll have more information about that as we progress further with the project.
Oh, okay.
If I can add a point of clarification through the chair, but there will be one spot. So it will not be building by building lottery.
Oh, okay. All right, thanks.
Can I just do a follow-up on that? So we already have a priority approach for RGI. And you mentioned on the second last page, priority access for affordable rental homes, and that there's requirement for a framework for decision-making. How are you approaching that framework? Because I suspect there are competing interests and priorities, and how will that get triaged?
Through the chair, thanks for the question. So we have Housing TO as our guiding council-directed framework right now. So that's sort of the foundation, the starting point. And we are in the early stages of figuring out what that framework might look like, acknowledging that Housing TO is sort of the existing framework that would provide the foundation for that work.
Okay. Using a human rights-based approach, how do you envision that impacting that priority setting and triaging?
Through the chair, we're in the early stages of developing this. So right now in Housing TO, there's priority groups identified. So that is, and those groups are ones that face various forms of marginalization and barriers to housing. Similarly, we have the Housing Charter and we have the Ontario Human Rights Code, all of which will need to be foundational pieces of any decision framework where we bring forward.
If any of our working groups can be helpful to you in thinking that through, please tap us, because I think that that's a very complicated and complex framework that you're going to need to devise. And I don't have a quick answer or suggestion, but I trust that you will build a process that acknowledges some of the competing needs, priorities, vulnerabilities, and so forth. And I think that that will be a challenging task. So if we can be helpful in any way. Diana?
So sorry, I talk too much. Well, and you're talking about priority groups, and we're talking about how we're going to establish what a framework looks like so that we are enabling human rights within the framework. And I can't help but look at the system and already see where there are gaps that exist. One being that this is a technological, it requires technology in order to access it. I'm working with encampment residents a lot of the time who may, on occasion, have a smartphone but will lose or break it fairly quickly. Work with seniors, for example, where there could be technological barriers for them to be accessing a system like this. And then I also look at the fact that we are looking at, you can be pre-eligible based on your income. A lot of people do not have on-record income. Absolutely homeless people, but migrants as well, newcomers. So there are those gaps that already currently exist in the system, which would be, you'd have to be accounting for them when you do develop that framework, and also creating pathways into accessing Math TO that aren't strictly through technology. And I wonder if you thought about that yet, and what a pathway would be for somebody who does have limited access to technology.
Through the chair, 100% we've been thinking about that and working on that for the last couple of years. Yulissa can talk about some of the, give you a high level of some of the things that we've put in place, and also happy to come and talk directly with any of the working groups to dive into these further if you'd like. We're very eager to continue addressing these barriers, so happy for your frank feedback.
Through the chair, I'll just add, over the past several years since we've launched My Access to Housing TO, we have had an opportunity to reach out to our stakeholders, to applicants. We have conducted several focus group series. We've done surveys. We've also invested further in our housing hub networks in terms of building out capacity to operate facilitated workshops in locations across the city. We welcome any additional feedback on how to better connect with applicants. And in addition, regarding the requirements for the notice of assessment, we have built in some flexibility, particularly for homeless applicants or applicants experiencing violence, newcomers to Canada, less than 12 months, in terms of some flexibility around the NOA requirement, so that they can progress, get their application in and on the wait list, and have a bit of time in terms of being able to fulfill that requirement in the future.
Harmy.
Thank you. I want to attest to your openness to receive feedback. As part of the working group, you presented to us and you asked some really good questions, and I know I was able to provide some input into your process. I guess this is just to say that there are a few things that we could identify off the top of our heads in terms of the different areas of expertise. However, I guess just wanted to highlight the importance of continuous evaluation and improvement. I think that's so key. That's something that will get us, if not to the perfect system, a system that is continuously evaluating and gathering information and trying to address those gaps and concerns and unintended consequences that we may have not foreseen. So I guess just to highlight that that is so key in terms of your implementation, that it should be not a one at a time thing, but rather continuously building it into the process. That's all. Thank you.
Excellent point, Harmy. With that, I think I'm going, Gord.
Hi. So there are a couple of very specific questions that I heard you trying to get advice for, but they're complicated questions. Things like carve-outs or code, giving priority to code-protected groups. I'm wondering if it would be possible if you could make some of those questions, like make a little document that explicitly asks some of those questions to help members here think it through, and maybe meet with the Access to Housing Working Group or make it available generally to members so that you could get feedback on those more precise questions, because I'll tell you, I get a headache trying to untangle them, and having a document that says these are the pieces we're struggling with or want advice on would be helpful. Is that something you might be able to do?
Through the chair, we'd be happy to do that.
Okay.
Great. Okay, then with that, I'm going to move that we receive the item, and if I could please see a show of hands. Great, carried. Thank you very much. Thank you to both of you. That was a really excellent presentation. Lots of work ahead, and to our what a couple people have said, we're happy to help wherever we can. I would now like to change the agenda to allow Anne-Marie to go next with the item on the report back from the Access to Housing Working Group, because she has a time constraint. Can I adjust the agenda? And I just need, I would move to do that. Can I please see a vote on that? All in favor? Thank you very much. And then with that, we will move to 8.5 as the next item. And it's over to Anne-Marie on improving access to working group chair update. Over to you, Anne-Marie.
Good afternoon. Can everyone hear me?
Speak up a little bit.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Of course, again, I'm Anne-Marie, the working group chair and vice chair for this committee, working group of improving access to housing. I'm just going to give a brief update on our work. Like Elizabeth said, I have a time constraint today, so unfortunately, after my report, I will have to leave. The minutes are posted and provide helpful context for members and the public, so feel free to go to the minutes and update further. There will be a motion from our discussion in this update. I will share that with you as well. My chair updates requested city staff to provide an update on the motion addressing federal and provincial program budget cuts, which went to council on October the 8th. Staff shared some impacts on COB, and you've heard a lot about that in this morning's conversation, and about high-HAP funding cuts on vulnerable groups. This committee sent a letter to the federal minister. You heard Elizabeth spoke about that earlier, so I won't have to get into all of that anymore. Our members discussed supporting city calls for stable COP funding to aid access to affordable housing, as this is an ongoing conversation for us. And around planning, there's a presentation on the city choice-based housing access system, which you've just been part of. So I'm really excited that we are moving the conversation forward, and I'm just hoping that a lot of what came out of it, that we'll be able to come to some really amicable ending in response to this. In response to the committee's request, staff from the Housing Secretariat, again, was here to present the housing access system implementation and improvement process of the choice-based housing access system for affordable housing. And in preparation for this presentation that went on earlier, the working group did prepare some questions in advance to reflect the committee interest. So hopefully that was reflected for everyone's interest. Regarding the working group past consultation that was in July, members raised concerns about the random draw in the housing cycle. Ongoing conversations throughout all of these presentations. Some discussions that came up, there were some discussions around concerns regarding the random draw, income thresholds, and access to affordable rentals. Of course, there's a need for more pathways into RGI housing and safer communities, ongoing conversations for us as well. Portable housing benefits help mobility, but landlords may lack some awareness. Some key questions to consider as we move forward in doing this work, especially for this working group, is questions around leveraging new supply, also bearing benefits, supporting transitions, and increasing RGI housing. There's also interest in co-op housing. What is it, how to access it, and how to expand supply and ensure equity, of which there is also a motion that for invitation for the Housing Federation to come to our next HRAC meeting, which will be in 2026. A little bit of discussion around the budget. We still needed some clarity on housing and the shelter budget regarding the gaps and allocations. We understand that budget spread across divisions. A summary would help us in respect to that. And it's important to explain funding sources and reallocations. This working group identified that for ourselves. Some key next steps would be to follow up in funding cuts and support portable housing benefits, explore co-op housing model and possible through a presentation at our 2026 committee meeting. And that's all I have for you today. I thought I'll make it brief. Like I said, feel free to go to the meeting minutes and update further. Again, I will not be here for the rest of the meeting. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of the afternoon. I believe there might be a motion or two for me to read. I'll let Elizabeth advise me on that.
Thank you very much, Anne Marie, but don't run anywhere just yet in case there are any questions. And also, I believe that you are putting forward a motion regarding an invitation to the Co-op Federation. So before we move to that, are there any questions from the committee on your report? Seeing none, do we receive the report first and then go to the motion? Let's just move forward with the motion. So I'll ask the clerk to put the motion up on the screen. And this was the last thing you mentioned, Anne Marie, regarding inviting the Co-op Housing Federation. So I will let you take it from here.
Thank you. The Housing Rights Advisory Committee recommends that the Executive Director, Housing Secretariat, invite the Cooperative Housing Federation of Toronto to provide a presentation at a meeting of the Housing Rights Advisory Committee in 2026 on how households access cooperative housing and how the supply can be increased to address the growing demands for safe, affordable, and adequate housing.
Thank you. Are there any questions on the motion? Straightforward invitation. In that case, I will put it to a vote. All in favor of inviting the co-ops to come and tell us how we can help solve this? Wonderful. Thank you. Carried. And that's it. Anne Marie, thank you very much for your work on this and your leadership. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Take care, guys. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.
So that brings us back to the Unhoused Working Group update with Diana Chan McNally. Over to you, Diana.
Thank you, Liz. So the working group convened on Monday, October 15th, and at that meeting we had a presentation from TSS staff on the Access to Shelter framework as per their request. The purpose of this consultation was to ensure that any future eligibility changes to shelter access are actually aligned with the Toronto Housing Charter and, of course, the city's own obligations toward the progressive realization of the right to housing. TSS has actually created an interesting framework to help them assess any potential equity impacts if and when there might be actual changes to shelter eligibility. I think what's important is that this framework was born out of some of the changes that we'd previously seen at the City of Toronto, and specifically where shelter eligibility changed for refugees during the summer of 2023. The framework is, in essence, an accountability mechanism for future changes to shelter eligibility, but we also felt as a working group that the framework could be a useful tool to evaluate current shelter eligibility requirements, and also felt that the framework could overall be utilized to help identify human rights outcomes for how people actually move through the system. So not just accessing the shelter, but when they're unsheltered, when they are sheltered, and furthermore through pathways into housing. So I would just say, in sum, we like it. We like the tool and think it has a lot of broad applicability to TSS's programs overall, beyond just what might happen in the future in terms of changes to shelter eligibility. We also discussed the City of Toronto's enhanced outreach model, which is embedded in the Interdivisional Protocol and Encampments. HRAC, I moved a motion at our last meeting. We will be receiving an update in January regarding data points I had requested in regard to who is moving where and for how long, et cetera. Our hope is to be able to evaluate the human rights outcomes of the EOM and then furthermore advise the city on aligning its approach with the goal of ending encampment evictions and also ending people living in encampments, ideally. The group also discussed cuts to IHAP funding, which has been brought up already, as well as a winter services plan. Specifically, we were curious to know what resources might be missing as well as any integration actually into the interdepartmental protocol on encampments, of which there apparently is none. At the time of the discussion, the winter plan had actually not yet been released. However, the working group had hoped to have a presentation on the winter plan to better understand the supports built in for this year. What we do understand now that it actually has been released is that the supports that are offered are similar to last year, which is actually, and I want to note this, it's a substantial increase from what we saw with our previous administration. We have put a lot more resources into the winter plan, which is great. But it was mentioned, I spoke on CBC Metro Morning, the services won't meet the need. Unfortunately, and this is through no fault of the city's own, because we have cuts coming from the provincial level. We talked about the COB, we had a motion around the COB. We also talked about IHAP funding, those cuts that are coming. So we are expecting to see a substantial increase in homelessness in the city beginning as early as this winter. As for next steps, the working group chair, myself, I'll begin to compile different questions from the working group on the enhanced outreach model in preparation for our January meeting of HRAC. So that's short and sweet. That's what happened.
Thank you, Diana. So opening it up to the rest of the committee, are there any questions? Harmy.
Not so much a question, but just a request. Could we access, or is there a way to take a look at the access to shelter framework? Is it public?
We're going to check with Joseph.
Through the chair, thanks for the question. The access framework will be public within the next week because it will be going to ECDC, Economic Community Development Committee, for the December 2nd meeting.
Thank you. Yes, I would love it if we could have access to it. I am particularly interested on the point related to violence against women shelters and the limits on stay. And this is one area related to intergovernmental potential collaboration, because they are funded mostly by the province, as we know. And so there is that layer of government and eligibility. And I know a tiny bit about it only because I did work in the shelter system. I know a lot has changed, but for the most part, the restrictions continue the same, and it's really hard for an abused woman to find a space any night in the city. And I know the City of Toronto has done some work as to referrals, but that still doesn't really, address the issue of access to specialized safety shelter spaces for victims of violence. So that's all to say that I would love it to take a look at it and have a bit of a read. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe we can ask the Housing Secretariat to forward that to the committee when it's available. Thank you, Harmy. Are there other questions for Diana to the working group? Joy.
I just wanted to say there was a phrase that really stuck with me and moved me, and it was, the objective of the city's encampment response should be getting people housed, not clearing a park. And I feel that should be like the city's creed on this treatment. I would love to, like, just those words, and I would love to see them embraced and promoted as an underlying concept.
Thank you for that, Joy. I think that's critically important, and I think it cuts across all of the work that we're seeing being done, and it's about setting human rights outcomes. So it's not counting tents or encampments, but people and their path to being housed. And I think the more we see evaluation and metrics being oriented to those kinds of outcomes, I think that will drive a different set of priorities. So I couldn't agree more. Thank you. Are there any other comments at this point? Seeing none, I'm going to move to receive the item, and all in favor, looking for hands. Thank you. Excellent. Thank you, Diana. Thank you for all your work with this group. The next item is 8.5, improving access to housing. Oh, we did that. Sorry, thank you. Next item is 8.6, maintaining housing working group chair update, and that's over to you, Annie.
Thank you, and thanks, Diana and Joy. I think that phrase really captures, I agree, really captures what the goal should be. So thanks for highlighting that. So our group met on October 1st, and we discussed priorities related to eviction prevention, tenant supports, displacement risks, service coordination, and vulnerable renters. We focused on the need for greater attention on how many supports are needed for vulnerable renters in light of the year-over-year cuts to the Canada-Ontario Housing Benefit and Interim Housing Assistance Program, which will have big impacts on people's housing stability. And then I'm just going to note now those needs are even more significant in light of the impacts, the potential impacts of Provincial Bill 60. So a major focus of the meeting was a consultation with city planning on updates to the city's rental replacement and demolition policies, including eligibility criteria for what are called vulnerable tenants, compensation processes, accessibility concerns, relocation supports, and safety considerations for gender-based violence survivors, and then potential improvements to tenant assistance programs. The group also identified upcoming work related to the 2026 city budget, including reviewing budget changes from last year to programs and supports for renters at risk of housing loss and instability, and prioritizing funding for rental renovation, licensing, and tenant protections. The group also discussed endorsing a motion from the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Advisory Committee related to disaggregated race-based data for social housing evictions. And this aligns with HRAC's own prior motion on multi-tenant housing. So we sort of ended off the meeting with some action items, including some future presentations from city planning, preparing a motion on supporting the data collection efforts, and then looking at next steps to provide input on the city budget. So the next item I think on this agenda is the disaggregated race-based data collection in social housing. So I could read, maybe I'll just read a little bit of background on that, if that's appropriate, or should I wait until that item?
Let's just wait until you complete this.
Great. Okay, so that's really the end of my report on the last meeting.
Thank you, Annie. Are there any questions from the committee for Annie? Great. Then seeing none, I would move to receive the item and see a show of hands. All in favor? Thank you, everyone. And so, Annie, you have a follow-on item that's related. So back to you for item 8.7.
Great. So we want to bring a motion, and just before I read the motion, I'd like to recommend that the Housing Rights Advisory Committee endorse the recommendations of the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Advisory Committee in item CR 7.3. Which were adopted by the Economic and Community Development Committee at its meeting on October 28, 2025. Disaggregated data collection is a central accountability and monitoring mechanism which can be used to assess progress in the fulfillment of the right to adequate housing and identify potential systemic barriers to housing. Equity-based data collection tools for vulnerable tenants in social housing would support HRAC's fulfillment of its mandate by ensuring that the needs of those with living and lived experiences of housing precarity, discrimination, and homelessness are reflected in city programs and service delivery. This additionally aligns with the aims of HRAC's motion HS 6.9, requesting an assessment of opportunities for collecting disaggregated data on vulnerable tenants in multi-tenant housing to better identify priority populations that may be disproportionately impacted by housing instability. So in sum, I believe it's important to champion all efforts to support the city's commitment to progressively realizing the right to adequate housing as affirmed in the Housing Charter. So the motion would be that the Housing Rights Advisory Committee endorse the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Advisory Committee's recommendations in item CR 7.3, addressing evictions through disaggregated race-based data in social housing.
Thank you, Annie, and I agree with all of your preamble about the importance of data, disaggregated data, and how this enhances our ability to move forward on the right to housing. Are there any questions from anyone around this recommendation? Seeing none, I would, oh, sorry, Lindsay. Did I see your hand go up?
Yeah, I'm just not sure what it is. Could you explain a little bit more on what specifically this does?
Annie?
Yeah, so it would mean that the city is so monitoring more closely who is being evicted, why they're being evicted in social housing, so that there are metrics and data about different aspects of people's situations or identities, so that they can maybe look at any trends that might emerge. That's my understanding.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, then I would move to adopt the item. And may I see a show of hands? Thank you very much. Carried. The next item is rental replacement vulnerable tenants project, item 8.8. I'm going to suggest a 5-minute break. We've been at this for almost 2 hours. So let's take a 5-minute break. Please be back in 5 minutes. We still have a lot to cover in the last hour and a bit. And we'll see you back in 5 minutes, which would be 11:22. I'll see you at 11:22. Thank you. Okay, we're going to reconvene. No? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now we have quorum. Okay, so we're going to get started. Just a reminder to members of the committee. Where's Diana? There she is. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We're good. Okay, great. The next item is 8.8 on rental replacement vulnerable tenants project, and we are joined today by Joanna Hashim and Christine Ono from City Planning, who are going to present on rental replacement. I apologize. Please correct the pronunciation of your names, as I probably got something wrong.
No, you got it right again.
Wow.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, committee members. My name is Christine Ono. I'm a project manager in City Planning on the policy team, and I'm joined here with my colleague, Johanna Hashim. And our team is responsible for implementing the city's rental demolition and replacement policy in our official plan. And so this policy requires private developers who are proposing to demolish existing rental housing to replace that rental housing as part of new development and to provide assistance to lessen hardship for tenants. We're here this morning to talk about a project particularly focused on how the city can better support vulnerable tenants through this rental housing demolition and replacement process. We had the opportunity, as Annie mentioned, to meet with the Maintaining Housing Working Group back in October and are happy to be here this morning to provide an update to the full committee. I think Johanna's just trying to get the presentation set up, so I don't know if we can get some assistance. Okay. Okay, so we'll get started with our presentation. Thanks, everyone.
Good morning, everyone. The city's official plan has policies that aim to preserve and protect the existing supply of affordable and mid-range rental housing by requiring the replacement of rental units proposed to be demolished. The official plan also aims to lessen hardship for tenants by securing tenant assistance and the right to return to a replacement unit for eligible tenants. Just to provide you with some context, last year, our team did a full review of the rental replacement process, and one of the outcomes of that process was a rental replacement handbook. We were also, as part of council adopting that handbook, we were directed to report back to the Planning and Housing Committee in January of next year on engagements specifically on an updated process for vulnerable tenants. So that's what we're doing now. We are aiming to identify an updated eligibility criteria based on an equity lens, as well as an updated program for vulnerable tenants, which supports tenants but also lessens the risk of project delays. So this work is really focused on this process for vulnerable tenants and not the overall rental replacement process. We're also not bringing forward any policy or bylaw changes. So this shows our project timelines. We had our first round of engagements in September, and these engagements were focused on identifying barriers and finding solutions. We went back to stakeholders actually just last week with our proposed approach to get their feedback on this approach, and we're now working on the report that will be going to Planning and Housing Committee in January. Here's a summary of the overall tenant assistance plan. So it includes the minimum 6 months notice, a right to return to a replacement unit, rent gap payments, and the Residential Tenancies Act compensation or an alternative unit, moving allowances, the services of a leasing agent, and the last part, which is the focus of our work, is the additional financial compensation for tenants with special needs or vulnerable tenants, which is equal to 4 times the City of Toronto's average market rent by unit type and priority access to accessible units. So to access this additional compensation, tenants must be at least 65 years or older and or have a physical or mental health issue. Under the current process, tenants would self-identify and provide documentation to show their eligibility. So we retained Public Progress as our engagement consultant, and they led a series of engagements in September as well as last week. And these engagements included representatives of the development industry, landlords, tenant advocates, frontline workers, and tenants themselves. So we had a number of opportunities for tenants to participate in our process. At our presentation to the Maintaining Housing Working Group of this committee in early October, it was suggested that we reach out to organizations supporting women who were victims of intimate partner violence. So our engagement consultant followed up with a number of organizations, and they undertook an additional engagement session with 2 organizations who responded, and one of these organizations also joined our second round of engagements last week. We also undertook additional consultations and engagements with city committees and city divisions, as you'll see on this slide. So we got, we got a lot of feedback, really good feedback. Here are some key points that we heard. So we heard the need for in-kind moving and packing services, for example, health navigation, translations of material, support for childcare. We heard the need for a tenant support coordinator, and we actually got consensus on the need for a tenant support coordinator, both from the development industry as well as tenant advocates. In terms of eligibility, we didn't have consensus on who should be eligible, but we did hear that the eligibility should be context-driven as opposed to identity-driven. And it should be really focused on addressing the barriers the tenants who are going through the rental replacement process were facing. We also heard additional feedback, such as some criteria, such as age, should be considered along with other criteria, such as income. In terms of the process, we heard from stakeholders that lump sum payments sometimes are very challenging, especially for tenants who are receiving income-based government benefits such as ODSP and OW, because this actually impacts their benefits. We also heard that we should really prioritize in-kind supports instead of maybe not instead of, but over the additional financial compensation. We also heard the importance of maintaining tenants' privacy, because it really impacted security and confidentiality. So based on our research as well as the engagement sessions, here are the key changes that we are proposing. So one of the big changes is a move away from that additional financial compensation of 4 months average market rent and focusing more on in-kind supports. We're also, we're saying that we're proposing the move to in-kind supports to address one of the big challenges that we found through the engagements and through our research, which was the clawback of some income-based government benefits, the impact of the lump sum payments here. So we're also hearing that there was a need to standardize some of the supports that are already being provided. So we're proposing some guidelines, such as for the leasing agent or for alternative units. And really the move here is, right now we have a one-size-fits-all approach, and we're really trying to move to a more individualized approach. So this shows our proposed supports and the timelines for implementation. So the idea, as I mentioned, was moving away from the additional financial compensation of 4 months' rent and to more in-kind supports. You'll see that we're proposing most of the supports to be implemented in the short term, which would be as soon as council adopts the recommendations. And this is because a lot of these supports already exist or are already being provided. So they just need some tweaks that we believe we can accomplish in the short term so the tenants will have access to these supports. So just going through the supports, for the short term, alternative rent cap administration is really just about getting the same amount of rent cap payments but on a monthly basis. And this is to help lessen the impact for tenants who are receiving income-based benefits such as ODSP. It will also help tenants who have challenges managing money. So if they're getting the rent gap payment on a monthly basis versus a lump sum, then the idea is that they would have less of a challenge there. The in-kind moving and packing services will be provided instead of the moving allowance. So right now, they just get money to use for moving. We are proposing that they get in-kind supports instead. The leasing agent, as I've previously mentioned, and you'll see from the slide, this is not new. We're just proposing to standardize how this service is provided. And so we're proposing to introduce interim guidelines in the short term and more enhanced guidelines in the medium term. Prioritize interim units refers to identifying groups who would be prioritized for interim units in the neighborhood, because we heard from stakeholders that there are certain groups who really do need to stay in their neighborhood. Transportation to viewings or virtual tours. This is a service that we see a leasing agent being able to provide, but we wanted to call it out here just because we heard from stakeholders that this was actually really important for persons with disability. So we wanted it here just so it's obvious to everyone. And finally, accessibility modifications of the replacement rental units. So this is not a city requirement, it is a requirement under the Human Rights Code. And we're calling it out here because we're not sure whether tenants and landlords actually are aware that landlords have a duty to accommodate tenants' accessibility modifications requests as long as the request is reasonable. So we're calling it out here, and because it's already a requirement, we believe it should be implemented fairly quickly. So for medium-term supports, the alternative interim unit is again not a city requirement. It's a requirement under the Residential Tenancies Act, but it's one that we highly encourage. But we did hear from stakeholders that there needs to be more of a guideline or framework around this, because this would replace the rent cap payments as well as the 3 months Residential Tenancies Act compensation. So we're working on developing guidelines for this, and it would include like what this would look like, how many options a tenant gets, and even just what would be considered reasonable options. So we also heard that some tenants would have greater challenges moving out of their current rental units due to hoarding issues. So we are proposing these services, but we're proposing them in the medium term because there's still work for us to do in terms of what this support would look like and and just the cost of the service and the moving firms who would be qualified to do this service. So these medium-term supports, we're proposing implementation in the fourth quarter of next year. And so finally, the last column is about the additional supports that we're trying to work on. As I mentioned, we got consensus on the need for a tenant support coordinator, and so it's there. But it is one of those supports that needs additional work from us to develop a clear framework of how this service will be provided and the minimum qualifications of the person providing this service. We also heard that this should be a service provided by a third-party nonprofit. So we also need to engage with nonprofits to gauge interest and even capacity among nonprofits. And trusteeship services, it's the same. It requires a clear framework and costing from us, so we're proposing these as more long-term supports. So it's there, we are definitely working on it, but it's not going to be implemented in the short term. So these supports are actually already being provided, but they're being provided on an ad hoc basis. So our intention here, our proposal is to develop some guidelines to just standardize these services, and all tenants would be eligible for these services. These are the short-term supports that we're proposing with the corresponding eligibility. So if you look at the list, it might look like we're trying to broaden eligibility, which in some cases we are, but we're also really focusing, we took that equity lens and tried to focus on tenants who would really need these additional supports to move out of their current unit into interim housing and then on to the replacement rental unit once it's ready. So in general, we are proposing that tenants who are of advanced age and low income, tenants with disabilities or accessibility needs, single parents with low incomes, tenants with, who are receiving income-based government benefits, tenants who have challenges with money would be eligible for these additional supports. As I mentioned, we're also proposing to prioritize certain groups so that they can potentially stay in the neighborhood where their current rental unit is located. So this would be tenants who are currently undergoing medical treatment in the neighborhood, as well as tenants with school-aged children. This is just a slightly longer list for if the tenant support coordinator is implemented, and it really just, the new additions would just be newcomers with low incomes as well as tenants who are not fluent in English. So we're also introducing several process changes to incorporate what we heard from stakeholders. So we heard a need over and over for clear communication and information to be provided more often and earlier in the process. So we're introducing several points in the process where we share information with both the developer and tenants. So really early on in the process, the tenants will get a notice of complete application. At that point, we are also proposing that they will get a paper brochure that will give them some information, but also lead them to the replacement rental handbook that I mentioned earlier, which is online and which would also have the menu of supports. So this brochure would also tell them who to contact if they have questions or if they want a hard copy of the handbook or if they want the handbook in different languages. We are also proposing to do a tenant needs survey to give tenants an opportunity to identify if they need the additional supports and also to identify if they are eligible. And we're proposing to do this tenant needs survey at 2 points in the process. So really early on, and then later in the process before move out and after the tenant meeting. So the idea here is when you get the information, that brochure, you have an opportunity to identify needs. But if you're not able to do that at that point, then you'll still have another opportunity later in the process. So we're trying to address the concern that there might be tenants who fall through the cracks. The results of that survey will go directly to city staff, so the developer will not be seeing any results from the survey, and also documentation to confirm eligibility will go directly to city staff to address privacy and safety concerns, including concerns for tenants who are victims of domestic intimate partner violence. In terms of next steps, our engagement consultant, Public Progress, is currently working on an engagement summary report that will be attached to our staff report that's going to Planning and Housing Committee. And we're anticipating going to Planning and Housing Committee on January 20, 2026 with the results of the engagement as well as our proposed program. So here are just some questions. As Christine mentioned, we've already engaged with one of your working groups, but we thought we'd bring up these questions, and we would really appreciate your thoughts on this. But we're also happy to answer any questions you may have for us. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for all of this work. This is an incredible overview. I'm going to just take a look around to the committee. There's a lot there, and a lot of it touches the various parts of work that members do. So are there questions or comments from committee members on the report? Joy.
Thank you, and for that amazingly detailed report. Thank you very much. Many years ago, I was involved in a study that was looking at providing supports to displaced tenants in 4 apartment buildings. These would be redevelopments. And one of the striking things, we talked to tenants, we talked to many people, was that everyone who was being displaced had a person. You know, that's my guy, who I contact for everything. They're the conduit for other services, other resources, the search process, all of that. I wasn't clear, is that what this tenant support worker is, or is it something different?
Through the chair, thank you so much for the question. And yes, that's the intention for that tenant support coordinator. In the meantime, our team, each of us is assigned a file, so the housing policy planner will always be available for questions. We also got suggestions from some of the stakeholders last week to potentially connect with the Housing Secretariat in the meantime for additional supports for tenants while the tenant support coordinator is not in place yet.
I guess what I'm saying is, to me, that's the first thing, is to have that person, because then all the other things may exist, but the person doesn't access them because they don't know, or they don't, and so forth to go about it. So I'm hoping that that becomes a priority.
Thank you. Yes, it is definitely what we heard. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, we're not really in a place yet where we can implement the tenant support coordinator. So, sorry, so we're trying to find interim supports right now. So there will, like I said, we're trying to provide information more often and have the housing planners contact information really early on in the process for tenants, and multiple touch points with tenants. Ideally, maybe not next year, but eventually the intention is we will have a tenant support coordinator, and they will be the person, the tenant's contact.
Harmy.
Thank you for your report, and thank you for following up on, if I recall properly, a recommendation from the working group to consult with those who are in charge of working with victims of violence. I appreciate that. I'm happy to see that a couple of them did respond to that call. My question is about, similar to Joy's questions, the tenant support coordinator. On the eligibility, I did not see there if there was any consideration for those tenants who are at risk of or have experienced GBV or IPV, in terms of ensuring that they actually are in contact with someone who could help them navigate that transition, knowing the risk assessments, our safety plan that hopefully they'll have in place, and some of them are built within the context of where they live. So I wonder if there was any, any thoughts on that when you consulted with the experts on the violence against women sector?
There was definitely more concern about privacy, and that's why we're introducing the new process where everything goes to the city instead of it used to go to the landlord. We also are proposing that not that everyone who is a victim of violence is a single parent, but we're also proposing single parents be eligible for some of these supports. The idea really for the tenant support coordinator is we have a list of eligible tenants who we think should be eligible definitely, but the intention for the tenant support coordinator is they would also help identify anyone who was not necessarily identified as eligible for these additional supports, but potentially needing that extra support. So what you mentioned, for example, it doesn't necessarily have to be additional supports, but just making sure that there's privacy and safety, right? So the hope, the intention is that the tenant support coordinator will help with that. And in the meantime, it'll be us, city staff, helping to ensure that tenants are, that their information is safe, first of all, and providing any connections we can to services that are available in the community. Because we're aware that we ourselves are not able to provide that support, and neither can the developer, but the intention is just at least to connect them with.
Absolutely, to connect them, yeah. I mean, I don't think there is any expectation to have the tenant support coordinator to be an expert on that particular area of work because it's so risky, and you would want to have someone who has that expertise. And that's exactly why I was wondering, I was trying to kind of think about the different statistics and data that we review in the context of survivors of gender-based violence, and some of them do fit within what it's already there, particularly in terms of the longer term. But single women do experience GBV and IPV, and actually young women are at the highest level of experiencing IPV and GBV. And so I guess the question or the comment is are there any concerns that I'm not thinking about to add on the eligibility tenants who may be at risk or are at risk of experiencing IPV or have some level of disclosure related to IPV or GBV? Just food for thought. I just did not quite see the population that I consult with often quite reflected in here. And there may be something that I'm not thinking about that is related to jurisdiction. That's fair, right? I was wondering about that.
Through the chair, thank you. It's a very good comment. And actually, if you don't mind, I have a follow-up question, if that's okay. Would a tenant experiencing something like this, would they actually self-identify, do you think?
Obviously, every case is very complex and is very individual, and you'll find some of those who may not. But for the most part, when it comes to survivors experiencing violence, I would say that they would want to let those who are at charge of that type of support, that they need help to build some sort of safety plan when it comes to the transition. So the safety plan is quite important because we're talking about different levels of justice systems interconnected. We may be talking about family law situations. We may be talking about criminal law or criminal justice or family justice. We may be even talking about immigration related matters that may be completely interconnected and even against each other. So because of the complexity of what I know they might be experiencing, I think that there may be some important component of having that process ready to have experts support them. And the particular concern when it comes to medium and long term is because the engagement or involvement with justice systems is not short term, it's not medium term, it's actually long term. So 2 years into it, 2.5, 3 years, you're still dealing with custody issues, maybe immigration, and the risk may continue still be very alive and very there. And so that's why I'm kind of identifying how that could be addressed to whoever needs it or would disclose to it.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is we need to call that out on our eligibility criteria, or at least consider it.
At least consider it, because again, I didn't quite see it in front of me as I wish I had, and again, please push back at any time or let me know if I'm completely off scope, because I can appreciate some potential jurisdictional pieces there, but if there is any that you can think of off the top of your head, it would be important to mention it and to have it ready so that it doesn't escape. I mean, we're having a hard time already identifying or being open or being able to see and read red flags as it is. Then we may want to have those red flags in front of us, especially when it comes to GBV and IPV matters.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other questions? B.
My ignorance, I kind of guess this also apply to rooming house, right?
That's right. So where 6 or more dwelling rooms are proposed for demolition, the official plan policy requires that those tenants also be provided with assistance. So yeah, under those specific instances, that's where the tenant assistance.
Yeah, because most low-income people, especially people on social assistance, most of us live in the rooming house. That's what we can afford. Yeah. Thank you.
I have a couple of just quick questions. One is a question of clarification. I appreciate, and I think it's really important, the move to in-kind from a cash transfer for all the obvious reasons. But is there an option for any part of that on the part of the individual, or is that a wholesale change to everything must be in kind?
So just to clarify, we're only proposing to remove the additional financial compensation specifically for tenants with special needs.
Okay.
So they will still be eligible for the rent gap payment, which is that bulk payment, as well as the requirements of the Residential Tenancies Act. As I mentioned, we're proposing flexibility in how those payments are made so that it doesn't impact. But yes, it's just that 4 months, and we're doing that so that we can introduce all these additional in-kind supports, but still have a balance.
I'll just add, so for example, in the case of moving services, a tenant could choose in-kind moving and packing services, or they could choose to receive like a moving allowance. It's their choice.
That was what I was getting at. Okay, thank you. And then I have a question about the interim. So I think the tenant support worker, I agree with Joy, like really a great concept and becomes your go-to support. And I almost think about it as a tenant advocate almost in terms of navigating the services and supports that are needed. But that's not for another year. In the interim, are there any tools that are being proposed in terms of supporting people to navigate the various supports that are available? And then also, is there anything being considered in terms of recourse? If somebody hits a wall or is unable to get what they think they should be able to be receiving, is there an accountability function there?
So as it is now, tenants can always reach out to us, our team, the housing planners who are assigned to the file. And we, if applicable, we refer them to supports or even just to calling 311. So there is always that one point person that they can contact. In terms of finding interim housing right now, the leasing agent does that, and what we're proposing here is to continue that service until we can get the tenant support coordinator on board, hopefully soon, but just providing guidelines so that service from the leasing agent is more standardized. And we also heard, as I mentioned last week, that in addition to the housing planner being that key person that you contact, that we also work with the housing secretariat, because housing secretariat staff are more aware of what services are available in the community. So we're thinking through that and trying to find how we can support tenants better. And like you said, if somebody hits a wall, how we can help there in the interim while we're trying to figure out the tenant support coordinator.
Thank you. Not seeing any further questions, and we still have 2 more items to go. I'm going to move to receive the item. All in favor? Annie? Thank you. Carried. Thank you very much, Christine and Joanna. That was extremely informative and very detailed, and I think we got a really good understanding, so thank you very much. The next item is an update on the city's Housing as a Human Right training program. This was an item that was deferred from our last meeting. We will have Meredith Kratzman from the Housing Secretariat here to provide an update on the city's plans to procure and implement Housing as a Human Right training program for staff in housing-related city divisions, agencies, and corporations. I would add this was part of the initial plan around the Housing Commissioner roles and functions to deliver this type of training. So delighted to see it happening. Over to you, Meredith.
Thank you to the chair, and thank you to the committee for having us here to provide this update on the city's work to develop, as the chair said, a Housing as a Human Rights training program intended for city leadership and staff involved in housing policy and service delivery. So as mentioned, City Council had directed the Housing Secretariat to procure a consultant. Can you hear me? Yeah. To procure a consultant to support this work, which is really about supporting the city's commitment through the Toronto Housing Charter to advance the progressive realization of the right to adequate housing. And the training program is really key towards fostering a culture of housing rights at the city and recognizing the city's role in advancing the right to adequate housing. As mentioned too, it's a part of a suite of actions the city has taken, which includes the establishment of this advisory committee to council, as well as some other actions. So it's part of this city's work in this important area. So we were going to provide an update at the September meeting, but the item was deferred until today's meeting. I would have been presenting with Emiko Ono, and I didn't even introduce myself, but I would have been presenting with Emiko Ono, a manager in the Housing Secretariat, but in the interim, she has left to go on parental leave, and maybe at this moment, I'm not sure, entering into that next phase of her journey. And also in the interim, we are really happy to have completed the procurement process, and we're able to have our consultants here with us today. So the process began earlier in the year, and we have recently been able to onboard them to work on this with us. So I'm excited. Instead of me speaking a bit about what we are planning to do, we have our colleagues now from the Canadian Centre for Housing Rights, who was selected to work on this with us. They will be able to speak to you about the approach and how they'll be working with the city to develop this important training program. Canadian Centre for Housing Rights really brings critical expertise in developing and delivering training on the right to adequate housing very explicitly, as well as expertise around housing as a human right within the municipal context, and have really important connections and relationships within the community to help inform this work. So I will let them speak to their approach and the organization as well. And so we'll hand it over to them actually to lead us through this item.
Thank you so much. Working okay? Yep. Okay, great. Hello, everybody. My name is Margaret Flynn. I'm the Director of Policy and Law Reform at the Canadian Centre for Housing Rights. And Sarah, maybe if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? My name is Sarah Byer, and I'm the Manager of Policy at the Canadian Centre for Housing Rights.
So thank you so much for having us here today. We'll just take you through a few of our brief slides, and then we'd love to open it up for questions and feedback. So just a little bit about us at the Canadian Centre for Housing Rights. So we do a wide range of complementary work at Canadian Centre for Housing Rights. We have a services section where we provide legal information and support for people in precarious housing situations. We have an education section where we share knowledge with renters who are precariously housed and also with people who are experiencing homelessness about their rights. We have a policy section where, in collaboration with affected communities, we propose housing policy solutions. We have a research section which really informs our evidence-based approach to policy and other work. And we have a law reform section where we advance legal frameworks and arguments to protect housing as a human right in the law. In this project, we will be working in partnership with Aboriginal Legal Services. We are very happy that we've been able to engage in this partnership to ensure that our training is culturally appropriate and responsive to the needs of Indigenous communities. And so we will be partnering with ALS to consult and support at all stages of the project, including at the consultation, curriculum design, and delivery stages. And really, this partnership works to ensure that the training content is not just rooted in legal policy and expertise, but is also reflective of Indigenous perspectives and realities. Our colleague from Aboriginal Legal Services was not able to come today, but as I say, we're very excited to be engaging in this partnership and to be working closely with them throughout the project. Now, in terms of an overview of today's presentation, we'll be covering 4 main points. First, our training approach and development. Next, our work plan. Finally, we'll review some key points that we discussed in the presentation, and then we will open it up for questions. So in terms of the training approach and development, we'll speak about three things. First, the purpose of the training, then the approach that we're taking with regard to the training, and then the deliverables. So in terms of the purpose, our goal here is to support the city in its efforts and its commitments to enhance its capacity to apply a human rights-based approach to housing policy and services delivery, and to support the objectives of the City of Toronto's Housing Charter. It's also to establish a baseline understanding of housing as a human right across city divisions who are involved in housing, recognizing, of course, that different staff and divisions are coming from different levels of understanding. So we really want to keep that top of mind when we're designing and delivering the curriculum, but also when we're engaging in consultations at the front end. So we're coming up with curriculum that really is going to meet everybody where they're at. In terms of our approach, I will turn it over to Sarah.
Thanks so much. So as Margaret mentioned, we are going to be working with Aboriginal legal services throughout all 4 phases of the project, and they're really, a core project partner with us to deliver this training, to develop it, all of the different components, as Margaret mentioned before. We are going to be applying adult education principles, and as Margaret mentioned, we have a dedicated education team that is really well versed in this approach. Really key to this work is that we want to be able to ensure we are reflecting the needs of people in the City of Toronto that engage with the city's housing programs, to ensure that this training can equip city staff to really be responsive to what communities on the ground really need. So we intend to do stakeholder engagement to help inform the development of the training. So just a couple of examples. CCHR, the Canadian Centre for Housing Rights, we coordinate the Right to Housing Toronto network, which is a group of individuals and organizations in the city working to support the city in implementing the right to housing. I know there's a few members that are part of this committee as well. CCHR also coordinates a community of practice of frontline service providers who work with tenants and people experiencing homelessness, so another core group. And then ALS, also Aboriginal Legal Services, also have a number of partners across the city that we will be engaging with as well, among others that we'll chat about a bit later. And then we want to ensure that we prioritize the long-term sustainability and capacity building around housing as a human right through the development and kind of follow up to the training as well. Back to you, Margaret.
Thank you. So in terms of deliverables, of course, there is the consultation phase at the beginning and the evaluation phase at the end, but the core deliverables are these that you have on your screen. So first, the online modules on housing as a human right. And these are self-directed, introductory level learning for all staff from relevant city divisions, agencies, and corporations. And this will be integrated into the city's existing online learning system, the ELI system. The second component is the instructor-led training sessions on housing as a human right. And these will be in person and or virtual. That's something that will come in part out of our consultations, is determining what format will work best for people. But it will be instructor-led training offered to senior leadership and relevant staff from city divisions, agencies, and corporations. So we anticipate at this stage that the attendance will be up to 200 staff. But again, it's very early days here. We still have to enter into the consultation. So a lot of this will be firmed up through the consultations themselves. Now, in terms of the work plan, phase 1 is the project start, and this is the phase that we are in at the moment. We had a kickoff meeting with the city, and then we are working on finalizing our work plan and our consultation plan. So this stage is in progress.
So building on our proposed approach for consultations, so we want to be able to hear from, both internal groups in the city as well as external groups to help inform the development of the training. So we plan to engage with housing-related divisions, agencies, and corporations within the city, external community advisory groups. We also intend to gather lessons from existing housing as a human right training that's happened with the city already. So for example, we know Toronto Shelter and Support Services did some training led by Maitri, so want to be able to build on both the content but also the lessons learned of how that training went. And then once we conduct all of those consultations, we will put those findings into developing the draft training program. And just in terms of a little bit more detail, so we have kind of a few different approaches that we're proposing to take. So we would have kind of more informal engagement sessions with some of the key community partners that I mentioned, ALS's partners, Right to Housing Toronto, the Community of Practice, folks that have delivered existing trainings, some advisory groups, potentially this advisory committee here, and key city staff. But then we also are proposing to distribute a survey to representatives of all the different city departments that would be involved in the training or receiving the training, and also have more formal consultations with senior city leaders and with ALS partners. And really, we want to be able to understand, as Margaret mentioned earlier, where the kind of understanding around housing as a human right lies within all of these different departments across the city, what community needs look like, but also to be able to develop the training in a way that's going to be responsive to the different functions of city staff, whether they are frontline, working on the front line, developing policy, kind of in a more leadership position. We want to ensure that the training can really respond to and help inform those different positions in implementing housing as a human right. So this consultation phase, we are just finalizing the consultation plan now, and then look to complete that by February 2026.
So after the kickoff and the consultation, that brings us to phase 3, which is the training, design, and delivery. That's the point where we would be developing the online module and the instructor-led training materials, ensuring that they are AODA compliant and accessibility compliant, finalizing the training implementation plan, developing an evaluation plan and metrics, and then delivering the online and the in-person training sessions. And this phase is to be completed by September 2026. Finally, for evaluation and final report, this is the phase where we will be analyzing the feedback and assessing the lessons learned from the pilot sessions and the evaluation post-session feedback, finalizing the training program materials, and drafting and submitting the final report that includes recommendations for sustaining and updating the training. There originally had been a plan to present the final report to HRAC. However, given a change that would have been in June 2026. However, given the change in timelines, the final report will not be ready by June 2026. So we are looking at alternatives, ways that we can, bring something prior to the final report to HRAC, ideally around June 2026. So just to summarize then the key points, we've got the purpose being to support city efforts and commitments around housing as a human right. The approach is to prioritize collaboration with Aboriginal legal services, city staff, and community advisory groups. The work plan includes the consultation plan, the training, design, and delivery, the evaluation plan, and of course the final report and recommendations. And then the deliverables include the self-directed introductory level learning for staff and the instructor-led training for senior leadership and relevant staff. So at this point, I'd like to pose some questions for HRAC and I definitely invite any questions that you may have as well. The questions that we have generated here are, first, how would you like to be engaged throughout the development and the rollout of the training? Second, as we undertake the development of this training program, are there critical elements or topics that should be included? Third, how can we ensure the training will meet the needs of people who use or need the city's housing programs? And fourth, following the rollout of this initial training, how can the city support ongoing capacity building across its staff on housing as a human right? And we're definitely open to receiving any feedback on these questions after today as well. But we would welcome any comments or questions from you all now.
Thank you very much, Sarah and Margaret and Meredith. I think this is an exciting next step. I want to get to some comments or responses to the questions you've posed, but before we do that, I just want to put forward, yes, to extend the meeting to finish the agenda. So is that a motion? Yeah. Putting forward a motion to extend the meeting to 12:45. Will that be sufficient? Just to complete. We're going to extend the meeting to complete. Thank you, Gord. All in favor? Are you going to walk out? You're not walking out. All right, thank you. So passed, carried. And so back to the questions that you had posed to us. Can we get the questions back up on the screen? Is that possible? Thank you. How would we like to be engaged? Are there critical elements to be included? How do we make sure the training meets the needs? And how do we sustain this? Are there any members of the committee that want to respond to any of at this point? On the first question, I'd like to suggest that a deeper dive might be better facilitated in different working groups. We have 3 working groups, and so I actually think diving into each of those might provide you with a little bit of what you're getting. I think it's a better use of how we divide the work in our committee. So I would suggest that. I have one question, then I'll open up to the rest of the committee. I think it's great that this is cutting across so many parts of the city. Will city councillors be able to access this training? It's a question. Meredith, you have an answer to this, perhaps.
I can attempt to answer. We will be making the training, particularly the online training modules available, and certainly it's something that could be shared with councillors, I believe. At this time, there's no plan to include city councillors in the training, though. So in the materials for this item, there is our previous presentation that includes the whole list of divisions, agencies, and corporations that are to be included as directed by council.
It might be interesting to make a special session available for councillors who may want to understand better what the implications of a human rights-based approach mean for the city and their decision-making. It would be a different kind of training, Gord. What if they provide snacks? Okay, all right. Harmy.
Yes, thank you. It's actually an interesting comment, and it's interesting because at Women Act we're doing a little bit more of training. Training and education is one of the areas that we are now exploring more, and we are working a lot with new, I'm going to call them non-traditional sectors in the context of gender-based violence and intimate partner violence. And as we continue to explore and learn to work with those we haven't worked enough before, we actually realized that working with senior level people and having them involved as part of not only taking the training, but speaking about how important this training is, made a very, very big difference in terms of uptake and the people who actually move forward. In other words, if you have your boss speaking about how important this is for that particular division, it would make a difference in terms of not only the training, but the adoption, and the understanding, and the specific, I guess, outcomes that you want from the training. And so that is actually related to the city divisions that you have in here, that it might be worth to have somehow, words or quotes or some level of intervention from the, I don't know the layers in terms of who's the senior level at every one of the divisions, but it might be worth to explore some of that. And yes, I would love it if we as committee members could be not only part of the consultation process, but also be able to access it. It would be really good, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Harmy. Are there other, Annie?
Yeah, I just wanted to start full disclosure. I'm a colleague of Sarah and Margaret, so just very proud of the great work that CCHR has been doing. I just wanted to say also, I think it would be great if there was maybe consultation with the working groups and we get more of a chance to dig in and give some feedback. I also wanted to support the idea that perhaps councillors could access the training. That would be, I think, really helpful. And then I just wanted to say off the top, funding is always, there's so many demands on the city to fund different programs, but I really think that being able to speak to the great importance of budget considerations and funding allocations, and that the right to housing, what the right to housing says about that and how that directs those decisions, I think might be something that's really important to focus on with this training. And what does maximum available resources mean, and maybe even more clarity for decision makers when it comes to that, because I think we know a lot of the problems people are facing, and we also know that resources are not there for them when they need them. So just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Annie. I suspect we're going to have more to say as you move through the process. Are there any other final comments for today, though, to offer them to take away? Seeing none, I'd like to thank you for coming in to take us through what the plan is and the interest in getting HRAC's input as you go through the process. I think we're all looking forward to seeing what you produce, and I think your final point around the sustainability of the program and embedding the learnings into the culture of the city will be really critical. So interested to see that work unfold, and thank you, Meredith, for getting us here and the work on the part of the Secretariat in procuring and getting all of this in place. If there's nothing further, I will move to receive the item. All in favor? Excellent. Carried. Thank you. And we'll move to our final item for today. This is 8.10, potential impacts of Bill 60 on vulnerable tenants. As I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, this was something that was referred to us by council, in fact, through executive. And so, as you know, Bill 60 is coming into play, and what difference will that make for tenants? Delighted to have Aisha Salim, who's going to provide a presentation on the impact on tenants and also city services. Welcome.
There we go. Does that work now? Perfect. My name is Aisha Salim. I'm the manager of the Renter Strategy Unit at the Housing Secretariat, and as mentioned, I'll be presenting a summary of Provincial Bill 60 and its potential impacts on renters and city services. Bill 60 was introduced by the province on October 23rd, 2025, and included a number of tenancy-related proposals. The province is consulting on 4 of those key proposals until November 22nd. These proposals include reducing compensation for landlords' own use evictions, shortening eviction notice periods for rent arrears cases, limiting the time to request reviews of LTB orders, and restricting renters from raising new issues during LTB hearings. Beyond these consultations, Bill 60 also introduces measures such as defining persistently late payments, changing eviction forms, and increasing enforcement resources to speed up evictions. City staff, including Toronto Public Health, the Housing Secretariat, and Toronto Shelter and Support Services, have analyzed the impacts of Bill 60 on renters, and we believe there's going to be significant and negative impacts that threaten tenant stability. These changes are going to deepen barriers for vulnerable populations at a time when 40% of renter households are already struggling with affordability challenges, and renters are already facing challenges in navigating LTB and eviction processes as well. The changes in Bill 60 further limit renter rights to protect their tenancies and exercise their rights. Eviction risk is also a public health issue, and these changes may worsen health outcomes and inequities for the most vulnerable in our city. Renters most at risk are going to include racialized and Indigenous residents, newcomers, seniors, and people with mental health or substance abuse challenges who may be disproportionately impacted by Bill 60. We can expect that these changes are going to lead to more evictions, and when that happens, it does put additional pressures on city tenant support programs that are already oversubscribed, such as financial assistance and eviction prevention programs. Secondly, we can expect a ripple effect on the Toronto shelter system. This means higher demand for emergency shelters, longer stays, slower movement through the system, and unfortunately, it could lead to an increase in unsheltered homelessness as well. Thirdly, because there's no vacancy control at the provincial level, when units turn over as a result of evictions, they're rented out at much higher market rents. This speeds up the overall loss of affordable housing in the city. And for renters and city services, all of these effects have a combined and detrimental impact. On November 12, 2025, city staff provided a report to City Council on the impacts of this bill, and this was adopted by City Council. That was submitted to the province yesterday. The report, along with its recommendations, included asking the province to consult more broadly with housing advocates and service providers before moving forward with the remaining proposals, requesting provincial funding for tenant supports and eviction prevention initiatives, and then finally reiterating previous requests to the province for changes to the Residential Tenancies Act and its related processes to better protect renters and improve housing affordability overall. That's it, and happy to take any questions.
It is very bad. Thank you, Aisha. That was a really great overview. What is the current timeline on the progression of Bill 60? Are you able to provide that to us?
The next step for Bill 60 is to go to third reading. That date has not yet been set, but what we do know is the province has used a procedural motion to limit public debate on this. So beyond providing written feedback through the Ontario Regulatory Registry, there isn't a typical opportunity for stakeholders to depute to the province.
And do we have an expected date for third reading? We don't have that yet.
We don't have that currently.
Okay. Are there questions? There's a lot here. There's been a lot covered in the media. There's been a lot covered among advocates around housing rights. Are there questions among the committee for Aisha and what the city will be doing around this? All right, Diana.
You're laughing. I deeply appreciate what the city is doing, understanding that so many of us, almost half the city, are renters. So what's being put in place now, and I think what was put into the motion that was passed at council is excellent. I think I was hoping when this presentation was going to happen that there might be more granular kind of insight into what would happen to programs like EPIC, Rent Bank, and perhaps at this juncture, we don't know what that might be, but I would love to have that granular information come to us at some point, if that can be provided, not today, but in the near future.
Absolutely. I think we can provide some more granular level data at a future date. It is challenging to know the level of evictions that would rise once Bill 60 is passed, but I think what we are doing is we're going to be paying close attention to the caseloads. We're going to be paying close attention to the impacts on city services, and we can report back on that at a later date as well.
Great, that would be helpful.
I would also add that we drafted our submission to the budget before this was on the table. And so I think there's a section of our recommendations, of ATRAC's recommendations on the budget, that look at things like EPIC, like the rent bank, and noting the importance of those for those who live in precarity around their housing. I think that should be a contextual piece as the council and the mayor go into the budget process, because this is a heightened context. Yes, Diana?
Always more to say. And, I understand maybe there might be issues with disclosure around this, but the really important part of the motion, again, that was carried by council, to me at least, was that there was potentially a legal challenge that would be involved. Can we potentially get updates on this as this progresses? I know it's not a sure thing. The city solicitor will be looking at it. Again, there might be confidentiality issues because, as has been pointed out, we are not the client, but the City of Toronto is. But I think it's really important for us to understand how the city has our back. I'm a renter, many renters, I'm sure, in the room already. I would love to have updates on that as it moves forward as well.
Absolutely. We can take that back to our colleagues in legal services.
Okay, thank you.
So I think we can bookmark this for our next ATRAC meeting to have an update on what you're seeing, status of legal, and so forth. Oh, sorry. Is Annie?
I just wanted to say I would normally comment on, any ways the city can challenge this and funding allocation to existing programs to help people who are going to be put in precarious and dangerous situations in terms of losing their housing. But I understand the city is already moving on those items. So that's sort of the reason I don't have much to say, but I just wanted to highlight the importance of those two things and thank the city for the actions that it's already taking.
Okay, that is the state of Bill 60. I just want to echo, this is extremely serious for half the city who are renters, and I think we need to keep a close watch on that because the vulnerabilities will be deepening. Thank you, Aisha, for the presentation. I would like to move to receive the item. All in favor? Thank you. Can I also have someone please move the motion to excuse the absence of the members not in attendance today? Thank you, Gord. Moving it. Everyone else in favor is good. Thank you. And I will read it aloud that the Housing Rights Advisory Committee excused the absences, and it's good. Thank you. Good job. Yep, you heard all that. I just want to say thank you. That concludes our meeting for today. Our next meeting is Friday, February 20th. This meeting is adjourned. I just want to say thank you to the technical support that get us through this. Thank you very much. You're here before everyone else. You stay long after. Thank you to the clerk's office who gets us through all of my Thank you. And thank you to all the city staff who have been really helpful in taking us through the issues and the details and being responsive to our requests. Much appreciated. And thank you to the committee. Take care.
Thank you, Meredith.
I got applause.